Well, I asked her about, because she wasn't content just to say religious people volunteer for charities, if that was news to anybody, but she had to couple it with a smear against Fabianism and social democracy. Now, as a matter of fact...
Well, they weren't there, Christopher, that's all I was saying.
I'm so sorry to say that without
the
efforts of Fabianism...
But you're good at smears.
The efforts of Fabianism...
What's wrong with the smear?
I'll get to the end of this sentence if it kills you. I, for one, will take it as extremely insulting if any person of faith makes the assumption that their faith gives them a moral edge on me. I want to hear a lot more apologizing from the faith-based communities for the evil that they've done before they even start clearing their throats and telling me I wouldn't know right from wrong without their permission. I'm sorry, I won't be, can't be spoken to in that tone of voice, and nor should any of you.
So what if God actually exists, sir? Would he not have been good to you?
No. He wouldn't, because if that were true, it would mean that I had an eternal supervising parent who would never die and let me get on with my life, never let me grow up, would keep me under surveillance.
But you have, sir.
And supervision every minute of my life,
but you
constantly asked me to be thanking and praising him.
Yeah,
I think it would
that wasn't part of the scenario.
It would be like living in North Korea. I think it would be a horrible outcome.
Well, not sure that God is Kim Jong-il, but what if what I said is true?
Well, ask Kim Jong-il, he has a different opinion.
Well, secularism is the only guarantee of religious freedom, and yours and that of every other Muslim we will defend. But you won't be surprised that we have some questions for you in the meanwhile. Thank you. The people who you've been the megaphone for all evening and been encouraging, I might add, the silly girl who says, why should it only be men who decide? The people who... Randall Terry, Catholic... Randall Terry... Wait, are you asking me or telling me?
I'm asking you a question.
Well, why don't you listen to what I've got to say then?
You're saying that they're ridiculous people.
I've had to be sitting in this chair for half an hour listening to you being a megaphone for frauds, and I'm giving you my response. It's very impressive to me.
Okay, good.
It's very often the first thing. When we debate with Catholics, they always change the subject to charity right away. With Jews, it's usually a little later.
You just said that they...
And with Muslims, it's at the all the time. Because what else can they don't want to defend their faith.
But you just said the opposite. You just said that if you didn't believe, you wouldn't do it.
They don't want to defend their faith. They don't want to say, they feel uneasy talking about redemption, salvation, all this kind of thing. But look at the good work we've done. If you talk to the Mormons, they'll say, you may not think much of Joseph Smith. And I say, you got that right. But, boy, you should see our missionaries in Peru.
The government will do the work if religion does not.
Excuse me,
government?
What has this got to do with the existence of God or the validity of religious claims? It has nothing to do with it,
social
which
utility.
is why it's always introduced as a time-wasting tactic.
Wait. No, don't applaud that.
Nothing to do with it.
Your view would be the same as mine, that child sacrifice is reprehensible, would it not?
Did Abraham think child sacrifice was an okay idea?
He obeyed God and God intervened. The ultimate question is, does God think child sacrifice, since he sent his own son to be the ultimate sacrifice?
Well, he appears to be in favor of it.
He does appear to be in favor of it, but in context.
You and I agreed that we were not. I'm asking.
In his comment, one of the few he's made on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he has said it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry. They've already had that. The Bishop of Llandaff, in an argument with Thomas Paine, once said, well, when it says keep the women, as Paine had pointed out, he said, I'm sure God didn't mean just to keep them for immoral purposes. But what does the Bishop of Llandaff know about that? It says kill all the men, kill all the children, and keep the virgins. I think I know what they had in mind. I don't think it's moral teaching. For you to say of Nazism that it was the implementation of the work of Charles Darwin is a filthy slander, undeserving of you, and an insult to this audience. If it's an atheistic regime, then how come that in the first chapter of Mein Kampf, Hitler says he's doing God's work and executing God's will in destroying the Jewish people? How come the Führer oath that every officer of the party and the army had to take, making Hitler into a minor god, begins, I swear in the name of Almighty God, my loyalty to the Führer? How come
that on the belt buckle of every Nazi soldier it says Gott mit uns, God on our side? How come that the first treaty made by the National Socialist dictatorship, the very first, is with the Vatican?
If someone tells me that I've hurt their feelings, I say, well, I'm still waiting to hear what your point is.
Right.
I'm very depressed how in this country you can be told, that's offensive, as if those two words constitute an argument or a comment. Not to me, they don't. And I'm not running for anything, so I don't have to pretend to like people when I don't.
Right.
I want to go back to this importance of narrative in its own right. They're fables, they're folk tales that have endured. They're not literally true, but there's great value in the universal truths that are taught just by the story itself. For example, the creation story. Could you at all agree with me that some of those stories are valuable just as a metaphor?
The creation story is ridiculous garbage and has given us a completely false picture of our origin as a species and of the origins of the cosmos. It's done nothing but harm, and it's considered laughable by anyone who's ever studied the subject. I mean, if you want me to give you a good mythical or quasi-mythical story, it would be the life of Socrates. We have no proof, as with Jesus, that he ever existed. So it doesn't matter to me whether he did or not, because we have his teachings and his method of thinking and his extreme intellectual and moral courage. And anyone who could look me in the eye and say they preferred the story of Jesus or Moses or Muhammad to the life of Socrates would, I think, be, I have to say it to you, intellectually defective.
Is it really to be believed that until they got to the foot of Mount Sinai, the followers of Moses believed that up till then, adultery, murder, theft, and perjury were okay? They're suddenly told, oh, hey, we got some new ideas for you. I don't think so. It's a bit of an insult to the ancient Jewish faith, of which Jacob and I are both rather disgraceful ornaments in our different ways.
As in vindication, being proved repeatedly and over again right when other people were wrong, that does a lot for me. But raising the sights just a fraction, I'd say that to me that what matters most is the pursuit of happiness, in the words of our greatest founding father, and the pursuit of liberty, freedom, and that these things are incompatible, completely incompatible with the worship of an unalterable celestial dictator, someone who can watch you while you sleep and convict you of thought crime, and whose rule cannot be challenged, and who's the big brother whose eternal reign may not be disputed. That makes the concept of the pursuit of freedom and happiness completely negative, negates it. So one of the things I live for is to return a stout and joyful non-serviam to this dictator, who I'm pleased to find doesn't really exist, but is instead a creation of those who want to install a theocracy in the real life where I can participate, and I'm not going to give them an inch. The second thing I live for is, if not exactly passing on my genes, taking part in activities that might allow those genes to be passed on. And not scorning the three delightful children who result, who are everything to me and who are my only chance of even a glimpse of a second life, let alone an immortal one. And I'll tell you something, if I was told to sacrifice them to prove my devotion to God, if I was told to do what all monotheists are told to do, and admire the man who said, yes, I'll gut my kid to show my love of God, I'd say, no, fuck you.
Do you believe that God, if he's provided everything for you, has rights on your life?
No.
Because?
Why should he? What gives him this right?
Because he owns you. He's created everything for you. He's kept you alive.
I don't want to be owned. I don't want to be owned, and I don't recognize anyone's right to own me.
So ownership is a bad thing?
Of people, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's been widely considered. I mean, I know the Bible does call for slavery, as it calls for genocide, but that doesn't make it right.
In Christianity, you have the idea, for example, that morality is intentional. If you've contemplated the sin, Christ says, in a sense, you've committed it.
Thought crime.
One second. The mullah
thought
doesn't...
crime. Totalitarianism again. Thought crime.
Whether it is or not...
We know what you're thinking, and we can punish you for it. Totalitarianism defined. Tyranny defined. Thought crime.
Now, I hope I've made myself clear on the... But I'm wondering if I have, because you face me, Reverend, with two very unwelcome thoughts. Either I have been completely inarticulate in everything I've said this evening, or you have misunderstood me. I have to throw myself, or these are not mutually exclusive. And I should have seen that coming. Not imposed? Did you really say not imposed? What if you reject this offer? What have you been told for centuries by Christians? If you reject this offer that took place by means of a torture to death of a human being that you didn't want and should have prevented, if you could. What if you reject the offer? If you accept it, you can have eternal life and your sins are forgiven. Oh, great. What a horrible way to abolish your own responsibility and get your own bliss. I don't want it. Oh, you don't? Well, then you can go to hell. This is not imposed. This hasn't been preached to children by gruesome elderly virgins backed by force for centuries. This hasn't poisoned whole societies. You can make anything up like that as you go along, as far as I can see. It means it's white noise. White noise, what you're talking to me. Absolutely meaningless. I just have to say, I make my living by scrutinizing words. It's what I do. Not a single thing you just said made a word of sense to me.
Well, that's because you
and I don't think it would have written down either.
What is it about the way I'm talking that you can't understand?
It's ingratiating tone, I think. Probably. and the unctuousness of it, and the extreme imprecision.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I don't like.
Oh, my goodness. Extreme imprecision. That is
extreme vagueness and imprecision.
Vagueness and imprecision.
I'm not saying mysticism is not great, am I? I'm saying that the belief that there is a divine revelation that can be interpreted by humans giving themselves secular power in the here and now is a real menace. Whereas to tell a child, you go to this church, which means you'll go to heaven, but your little playmates don't go to that church, and therefore will go to hell, seems to me to be an unpleasant thing to be saying. But
yes, that is.
Maybe I'm in a minority then.
That could be an unpleasant thing, but how do you...
Actually, an evil thing to be saying.
Let's call it evil, Christopher.
And something that only a religious person would dream of saying.
Let's call it evil. Where does evil come from?
Religion. If I'm reading the Quran, I certainly say, well, I can't tell whether this book is the word of God or not. I can only doubt that there is such a thing. But I can hope that this was a bad day for God. Handed a small baby for the first time, is it your first reaction to think, beautiful, almost perfect, now please hand me the sharp stone for its genitalia that I may do the work of the Lord? No. It is, as the great physicist Steven Weinberger has very aptly put it, in the ordinary moral universe, the good will do the best they can, the worst will do the worst they can. But if you want to make good people do wicked things, you'll need religion. I don't believe in the rest of it, don't believe in the prophets, don't believe in the mountaintop, don't believe in the revelation. Well, nor should you. But how dare you suggest to us that we couldn't teach our children self-restraint and respect for others and the golden rule? How dare you?
You've made the worst concession already. You've already said you're a slave. So,
well, absolutely.
After that, mere obedience to orders is a small offense.
I readily admit that I'm a slave. I'm a slave of the Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm glad of your chains.
Yeah. Well,
it's absolutely fine for you, but you must leave me out of it. I don't want to be told that I have to obey these laws too, or that my children have to be taught this in school, or that laws have to be written to gratify the bizarre beliefs of a cult like yours.
Well, but
that's the thing I would need you to understand. You're quite happy to believe this. Why can't you keep it to yourself?
Why can't you keep your atheism to yourself?
Because the religious won't allow me to. Because every time I open the paper, there's another instance of theocratic encroachment on free society, which I won't put up with which I will not put.
Well,
so that's clear.
Staying in Africa, I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way. I say it in the presence of His grace, and I say it to His face. The preachings of His church are responsible for the death and suffering and misery of millions of His brother and sister Africans, and He should apologize for it. He should show some shame. Fourth, for condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church. You're born in sin.
There's a revolting piece of casuistry that's sometimes offered on this point. Yeah, we hate the sin only. We love the sinner. Stephen is, I'm sorry to say, not quite like other girls. It's his nature. Actually, he is like other girls in that he's, when I last checked, absolutely boy mad. He's not being condemned for what he does, he's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh, no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church.
Well, are you assuming that we have free will? Are you assuming that we have free will?
If you answer,
then give me another source.
If you answer my question with another question,
give me another
I'll still
source.
answer it.
Okay.
I will still answer it, even though your question is an answer to mine. Rather, not an answer, a response to mine.
Yeah.
The view I take about free will is that, of course, we have free will because we have no choice but to have it. I was, and to some extent, and I still, to some extent, am a dialectical materialist, and I also think there are some ironies in the universe as well as in history. But to say, of course we have free will, the boss says we've got it, is to make a mockery of the whole concept. And it's also to invite the question, what kind of tyranny is this that you want? You want an all-supervising, all-deciding person. I ask you first, what sources of information do you have about this person's existence that I don't have, that are denied to me? I'd like to know. And second, why do you want it? Why do you want to arrive at a terminus of unfreedom where there is a celestial authority upon whom all things depend and from which all things flow? Why do you want that, and how on earth do you know that there's any case to be made for its existence? No, I repeat, Jerry Falwell lived on hatred and superstition and bigotry. He preached dislike of people whose lives he knew nothing about. He raised money from credulous fools.
You don't know anything about his life.
Now, excuse me, sir. You can either ask me on and ask my opinion, or you may not. But I don't have to be here if you're going to take that attitude.
Well, you could leave.
You spent the first half by saying I had no right to the opinion you'd asked me on to express. Now you're tiring me out. I repeat, though.
No, what I said is your opinion was thoughtless. What you wrote was crude and mean and hateful. That's what I said.
You took up all the time for my answer with your long, rather unlettered question.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Falwell.
I would posit to you, Christopher, that there is no fundamental difference between what the Israelites did to the Amalekites and their surrounding neighbors or enemies than what the United States did justly in going into Iraq. Whether we did it principally for moral reasons, it certainly had a moral...
Can you possibly, for 1 second, be morally serious as a human being and say that?
Well, yes, I can.
We fulfill what Iraqis did we exterminate? What Iraqis did we enslave? What Iraqi virgins did we keep for our soldiers, having killed the rest of their families?
Well...
What are you talking about, sir?
But
my children must be taught this stuff. No, sir. No, ma'am. No day. No way. No shape. No form. You keep your illusion private.
You want a regime like that to have nuclear weapons? You're welcome. But you should say that's what you don't mind. Are you going to say that? Are you going to say you've no objection? That the real problem is the Jewish state? Come on, be serious.
So the Jewish state doesn't have nuclear weapons? Is that what you're saying?
Well, now, I appeal again to the fair-mindedness and intelligence of the audience. Did I say that?
No, but...
Did I in any way imply it?
No, but...
No. Did I not begin with a throat clearing, which I'll amplify if you will, about my long record of work about this, my defense of the Israeli dissidents who published the news about Israel's illegal program and gone to jail for it. I can refer you to all that if you like. But my point was directed specifically to you. Yeah. I said, does this, in your mind, make the destruction of human rights in Islamic countries okay or not?
No.
Good.
Okay,
no,
let's hear from Walid.
Well, that's progress of a kind. And because I'd never like to miss out a chance to congratulate someone on being humorous, if only unintentionally, for it's very touching for Tony to say that he recently went to a meeting that bridged a religious divide in Northern Ireland. Well, where does the religious divide come from?
Makes me long for a newer, more cranky pope who's going to walk the beat and swing the nightstick more. I mean,
I completely second those who were just applauding, but unfortunately it didn't break his heart when he found out. He knew that Cardinal Bernard Law was moving around sadistic predators, concealing their activities from the police, which it was his job to disclose, inflicting them on parishes where he knew they would attack again, and covering up for them. This is one of the gravest crimes in the calendar. This is the sort of crime that would make an atheist fear he was going to go to hell. It's the one thing no one can tolerate. Now, Cardinal Law, who should be facing trial in Boston, is instead a fugitive from justice in Rome, given a special sinecure and a place of refuge by His Holiness the Pope. He can't get out of that. That's wickedness. It's also, in my view, wickedness to say that condoms are more nasty and more dangerous than the AIDS virus, which was the Pope's official position. It's lucky for him that he isn't going to face judgment, because if he did, he'd have a lot of people's deaths on his conscience, as well as the rape and torture of a lot of children. These are things I wouldn't want to have to go to my grave with, even if I was sure there was no afterlife. And no one will say this week. It's all piety, it's all Pope all the time. And what about when you say man of peace? This is the guy who invited Saddam Hussein's chief henchman to the Vatican a couple of weeks before Saddam was removed, and fawned on him and called him a man of peace. That's Tariq Aziz, another wanted torturer and mass murderer. This is a pretty grim record.
Well, Chris, you better hope so, or you're going to hell if not.
Well, all the most amusing people seem to be bound the same way. If you want diversity as much as the professor does, as much as I'm sure many people here do, religious diversity, cultural diversity, what you need for it is this. You need a secular state with a godless constitution like this one.
I want to make it clear in our closing moments here, Christopher. I don't consider you an enemy. I don't consider you...
but I'm very sorry to hear that.
Well, I know, because you want me to be your enemy.
Excuse me, you are my enemy.
Well, but you're not my enemy.
How you can figure that?
No, because I don't feel a need to have to silence Christopher Hitchens.
Well, you don't have a chance of doing that. I don't mean that at all, but I mean your preachments are evil, and they're a direct threat to the survival of civilization. So if you don't consider me an enemy, you don't know an enemy when you see or hear one.
I say that homosexuality is not just a form of sex, it's a form of love, and it deserves our respect for that reason. That when my children were young, I'd have been proud to have Stephen as their babysitter, and I told them they were lucky. And if anyone came to my door as a babysitter wearing holy orders, I'd call first a cab and then the police. And it's your fault, sir and ma'am, it's your fault that that's true, and that everybody knows it's true. How you can live with it, I don't know. Neither of us can prove or disprove the existence of God. The difference is between us. I don't say that I'm an ordained minister, because I don't think I could push it that far. Mother Teresa, endlessly praised for work that most of the time she actually never did. I went to watch her very closely in Calcutta. You don't mind that she thinks that what Bengal and Calcutta mainly needs is a campaign, a clerical campaign, against birth control and family planning. Has anyone here ever been to Bengal and concluded that's what it really needs? That's what she was really campaigning for, in case you're worried. But never mind. She gives a wonderful impression of being a charitable person. So what Indians need is more missionaries to cure poverty, when everybody knows there's only one cure for poverty, which is the empowerment of women, which means giving them some control over their reproduction. Religion is poisoning our election and our democratic republic, and it's time that we said enough. Is it not the case that the spread of Christianity, about which you spoke so warmly and affectingly in your opening remarks, attributing it to the innate truth of the Bible story, was spread by that means, or because the Emperor Constantine decided to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire? Which, in your view, contributed more to the spread of the faith?
The Holy Spirit.
I rest my case.
Quickly.
So if your wife is pregnant and you know it's not you, the only alternative is that it's the Holy Spirit.
That's a false...
David Hume deals with this quite well. He says, in the case of the laws of nature being suspended, you have to ask yourself, have they been suspended in my favor, or am I possibly under a misapprehension? I think it's Thomas Paine who asks, which is more likely, that the laws of nature are suspended or that a Jewish girl should tell a fib? We have to grow up out of this stuff, you know.
All of this could be part of a plan. There is no way an atheist can prove it's not. But it's some plan, isn't it? With mass destruction, pitiless extermination, annihilation going on all the time, and all of this set in motion on a scale that's absolutely beyond our imagination, in order that the Pope can tell people not to jerk off.
Stupid. Right.
Christopher, I'm not sure if you believe in heaven, but if you do you think Jerry Falwell is in it?
No, and I think it's a pity there isn't a hell for him to go to.
What is it about him that brings up such vitriol?
The empty life of this ugly little charlatan proves only one thing, that you can get away with the most extraordinary offences to morality and to truth in this country if you'll just get yourself called reverend. It's one short of a trinity, I might add. The Son is the reincarnation of the Father. It is the most revolting and utter and absolute and heartless tyranny the human species has ever evolved. But at least you can fucking die and leave North Korea. Does the Quran or the Bible offer you that liberty? No. No. The tyranny, the misery, the utter ownership of your entire personality, the smashing of your individuality only begins at the point of death. Okay, let me see. I don't think it's going to take 10 minutes to disprove the existence of God.
So what does atheism offer?
Well, it offers the chance of living without illusion, which I think it says that philosophy and literature will do a great deal more for you. There's a lot more morality in them. There's a lot more ethical discussion in Dostoevsky, say.
It may be true, but who will present them in our society, in a real society? Who will present them in a way to create structure?
For now, I'm presenting.
There he is.
For now, I'm presenting. I can't do...
You're going to be very busy.
I can only appear in my own person here.
The question is to Christopher is how you can justify wanting to take something away from people from 95 that gives meaning to 95% of the American people and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people.
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so, as Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. Are not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
There are things that a morally normal, even if a morally average or mediocre person, would not, unprompted, do. For example, hold down their daughter at the age of 6, tear off her underwear, and cut her genitalia with a sharp stone. They wouldn't do that if they didn't think God was telling them to do it, or the mullahs, or if it's a boy, the rabbis weren't telling them to do it. One of the reasons why I have the lurid subtitle I do of my book, that Religion is a Poison, is that it makes ordinary moral people, compels them, forces them, in some cases orders them, to do disgusting, wicked, unforgivable things. There's no expiation for the generations of misery and suffering that religion has inflicted in this way and continues to inflict, and I still haven't heard enough apology for it.
And that's why Christ had to come, because we are fallen human beings.
And has to come again because he didn't get it right the first time.
Or what the Serbian Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox have just done in the Balkans. The most recent genocide we've seen in Europe, entirely done
by a Russian and Serbian Orthodox fascist and Catholic Croatian Ustasha, grinding a whole part of civilized Europe into nothingness and bloodshed for their filthy, stupid medieval quarrels. How dare you say that any secularist, we who've opposed this kind of barbaric stuff, are on all fours with these creeps? You should take it back. You owe me an apology. You lose, Boychik. You lose, Boychik.
Please. Hey, civility. Civility.
Civility's overrated. So when I say, as the subtitle of my book, that I think religion poisons everything, I'm not just doing what publishers like and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us in our most basic integrity. It says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian permission. It means we can't be good to one another. It means we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone who we fear. The essence of sadomasochism. The essence of abjection. The essence of the master-slave relationship. And that knows that death is coming and can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil. And though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity. Thank you.
Evening, I've been encouraging, I might add. The silly girl who says, why should it only be men who decide? The people who, Randall Terry, Catholic, Randall Terry, wait, are you asking me or telling me?
I'm asking you a question.
Well, why don't you listen to what I've got to say then?
You're saying that they're ridiculous people.
I've had to be sitting in this chair for half an hour listening to you being a megaphone for frauds, and I'm giving you my response.
It's very impressive to me. Okay, good. It's very often the first thing. When we debate with Catholics, they always change the subject to charity right away. With Jews, it's usually a little later.
You just said that they...
And with Muslims, it's at the all the time. Because what else can they don't want to defend their faith.
But you just said the opposite. You just said that if you didn't believe, you wouldn't do it.
They don't want to defend their faith. They don't want to say, they feel uneasy talking about redemption, salvation, all this kind of thing. But look at the good work we've done. If you talk to the Mormons, they'll say, you may not think much of Joseph Smith. And I say, you got that right. Say, but, boy, you should see our missionaries in Peru.
So government will do the work if religion does not?
Excuse me,
government?
What has this got to do with the existence of God or the validity of religious claims? It has nothing to do with it.
Social
which
utility.
is why it's always introduced as a time-wasting tactic.
Wait. No, don't applaud that.
Nothing to do with it.
He just...
Your view would be the same as mine, that child sacrifice is reprehensible, would it not?
Did Abraham think child sacrifice was an okay idea?
He obeyed God and God intervened. The ultimate question is, does God think child sacrifice, since he sent his own son to be the ultimate sacrifice?
Well, he appears to be in favor of it.
He does appear to be in favor.
Well, I asked her about, because she wasn't content just to say religious people volunteer for charity, as if that was news to anybody, but she had to couple it with a smear against Fabianism and social democracy. Now, as a matter of fact...
Well, they weren't there, Christopher. That's all I was saying.
I'm so sorry to say that without
the
efforts of Fabianism...
But you're good at smears.
The efforts of Fabianism...
What's wrong with the smear?
I'll get to the end of this sentence if it kills you. I, for one, will take it as extremely insulting if any person of faith makes the assumption that their faith gives them a moral edge on me. I want to hear a lot more apologizing from the faith-based communities for the evil that they've done before they even start clearing their throats and telling me I wouldn't know right from wrong without their permission. I'm sorry, I can't be spoken to in that tone of voice, and nor should any of you.
So what if God actually exists, sir? Would he not have been good to you?
No. He wouldn't. Because if that were true, it would mean that I had an eternal supervising parent who would never die and let me get on with my life, never let me grow up, would keep me under surveillance
But you have, sir.
And supervision every minute of my life.
But you
constantly asked me to be thanking and praising him.
Yeah.
I think it would
that
be
wasn't part
like,
of the
it would be
scenario.
like living in North Korea. I think it would be a horrible outcome.
Well, not sure that God is Kim Jong-il, but what if what I said is true?
Well, Kim Jong-il, he has a different opinion.
Well, secularism is the only guarantee of religious freedom, and yours and that of every other Muslim we will defend. But you won't be surprised that we have some questions for you in the meanwhile. Thank you. The people who you've been the megaphone for all
of it, but in context.
You and I agreed that we were not. I'm asking.
In his comment, one of the few he's made on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he has said it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry. They've already had that.
The Bishop of Llandaff, in an argument with Thomas Paine, once said, well, when it says keep the women, as Paine had pointed out, he said, I'm sure God didn't mean just to keep them for immoral purposes. Well, what does the Bishop of Llandaff know about that? It says kill all the men, kill all the children, and keep the virgins. I think I know what they had in mind. I don't think it's moral teaching.
For you to say of Nazism that it was the implementation of the work of Charles Darwin